will be to our advantage to address for a period of time the Hermetic tradition. One of the reasons for that is that when I more or less began my career up here on the Beechwood Hill, the audience had frequently asked him, well, what about Hermes and what about Hermeticism? So I thought that it's a question apparently that is in need of answer, and that we can do so within this context. Now, let me see. The trouble with making notes is that then you have to find them. And it's a trouble that I have encountered for many, many years. So I do have them here, and let's say occasionally we encounter the statement from people that Gnosticism is not the only gnosis, so what about Hermeticism? And this question is not altogether accurate in that fashion, but it is worthy of consideration. So what we need to keep in mind is that there was a tradition which apparently, as it is customary with traditions, was handed on. You know, the very word traditio means to hand on. So it was handed on to other people. Somehow now something has vanished here.
It was just one of the yellow sheets.
One of the yellow sheets. Well, that's the trouble with the air conditioning.
Yeah, exactly.
In any event, I was aware and probably in possession of the 3 hefty volumes of translations of thrice greatest Hermes by Mead, by J.R.S. Mead, the great translator of Gnostic materials. So I thought that if J.R.S. Mead devoted that much attention to it, it undoubtedly is worth such attention. And of course I had some basic knowledge of Hermeticism already. Now, what is this all about? To start out with the central figure, Hermes is an Olympian god, one of the pantheon of Zeus' many relatives, who's probably a son of Zeus, who is characterized by great mobility. Is characterized by many other things too, but if you want to sort of get a basic idea of what Hermes stands for, I think if you would say mobility, you would probably be pretty much on the right track. So if you like to conjure his image, which is actually quite frequently found in the modern world, all you need to think is of someone who has sandals with wings, and he has wings on his wand or scepter, he becomes the messenger of the divine world. The Roman form, by the way, is just in order to have our dictionary right. The Roman form is Mercurius or Mercury, not the car Mercury, but Mercurius the god. It is so. It needs to be kept in mind that there always was an esoteric side to the Greek religion, which extended the god Hermes onto a much, much larger field. Hermes, the one with the Herm, which I will explain to you in a minute. A herm or herma in Greek means something very mundane. It means a pile of stones. And what it indicated was that particularly in the earlier time of the Greek religion, people would pay homage to this god Hermes by building a smaller or larger sort of pyramid-shaped pile of stones. And that was the Herm. So Hermes is the one with the Herm, with the pile of stones. He became, whether by divine decree or by human determination, would be hard to tell, he became the messenger of the gods, the messenger of the divine world to humanity. And this was a very important activity within the divine order of antiquity. In Rome, of course, as I mentioned, the divine world in Roman form was represented by Mercury, and there always was an esoteric side to the Greek religion, which extended to the Roman and to Egypt for esoteric reasons. The winged god Hermes was chosen. Hermes, the one with the Herm, with the stone heap. Well, why? Surely, as Madame Blavatsky used to say, when somebody asked her a question that she didn't want to answer, surely, my dear, I don't know. And I think that will be pretty much my answer also. But Hermes, with the one with the stone heap, why was he chosen? The heap built of stones, and why this choice? Well, first of all, a heap of stones in this fashion, let's say in the Greek countryside, would be of a reminiscing quality. It made people reminisce of Egypt. It had the shape, vaguely the shape of a pyramid. And so right there, that particular connection in a visual fashion was established. So there always was an understanding that there is one of the gods who is their primary messenger, and who therefore travels around the world taking such messages, such inspirations as the gods desire humans to have at one particular time. And this was Hermes, or respectively Mercury. For esoteric reasons, the winged god Hermes was chosen. Hermes, the one with the herm, with the stone heap, built of stones as one heap. Why? So the pyramidic structure of the heap of stones built stones as one heap. We might ask ourselves, looking for the early beginnings of the figure of Hermes, as to why. The pyramidic structure, as I mentioned before, of Egypt, which became a cooperative venture of Greece and of Egypt, so that we have really a hybrid figure here. The pyramidic structure of the herm, built of stones as one heap. The pyramidic structure of as a cooperative venture of Greece and of Egypt. So that what we really have here is a particular influx of the Greco-Egyptian cultural matrix. Because let's say these countries then and now like to conquer each other. There's just no doubt about that. People like to increase their domain, people like to increase their influence, and as such, of course, they also took advantage of the flying god Hermes as a harbinger of a cultural and religious influence that otherwise might not have occurred. So we need to keep in mind, however, that there always was an inner side of the Greek religion, that needs to be understood. And so the god Hermes was chosen. Hermes, the one of the herms of the stone heaps, as we said. However, we may reflect a little bit more. Goethe, the great German poet, as he was called the Prince of Poets and the Poet of Princes. Goethe had indicated in the last verse of the second book of his monumental drama Faust. All things transitory, but as symbols are meant. And this is what I think the person aspiring to wisdom, through whatever avenue, whether it is through Jungian psychology, whether it is through theosophy, whether it is through some other comparative religious or mythic study, this is a very important adage. And when applied here, what we find is that an Olympian god becomes not a human. That's much more the messianic Jewish way of looking at things. He doesn't become human, but he becomes a combination of the human and the divine. The divine in a human form, which of course, if you want to be a little bit strict about it, is of course also true of Jesus Christ. So the ability to combine with another species, especially the human species, is one of the gods. And it can be carried on for various purposes. Certainly when Zeus comes down and chooses his brides among the humans, we can guess that the purposes are not purely devoutly religious. So there are all kinds of reasons. And these reasons in turn tend to reveal to us symbolically that the human and the divine are not as greatly and forever separated from each other, but that there exists a relationship which, however, is not easy to fathom and even less easy to understand. This, of course, overlaps on the Christian side to the attempted understanding as to how the Son of God could be both human and divine at the same time. And moreover, what the message, what the meaning of this to us can be. So we are dealing here with a twilight zone of understanding, which is not very easy to approach. In fact, one of the medieval philosophers wrote, I don't know, was it Bacon, Roger Bacon, probably, wrote a Latin treatise, Cur Deus Homo, why is God a man? Mm-hmm. So the strange combination of the divine and the human, whether within a structure that is monotheistic, that Christianity inherited from Judaism, or whatever other view may be taken, is of great interest. Why human and why divine, and how these two conjoin, and what their possible work, their possible task might be within the earthly sphere. Because somehow it has occurred to everyone, including the Greeks, who were very astute people, And in fact, various modern scholars have indicated that no matter what we do and how long a time passes, we are still all the students, the pupils of the Greeks. So that our intellectual orientation, our sense of myth and transformation, our entire approach to what modern psychology calls the psyche, and its translation onto a very personal level, we have inherited from the Greeks. And this shouldn't surprise us, because nations can have their own tasks. They may have their own way of entering into history or continuing within history, just as much as individuals. And so we might say, if we like to theorize about those things, that the Romans were the conquerors, of course, and the Romans created the matrix within which the Greco-Roman culture could function and flourish. Even as we might say, hopefully without offending anyone, that the British in the more modern world did the same. If it hadn't been for the British, all the speculation about one world and one humanity and the one human race or so fall to the ground. Because had they not navigated the world and established aspects of their culture from Australia to Greenland, then there would be no one world. Humanity on its own, without any help, doesn't produce too much greatness. No. Why? Because when it comes right down to it, I'm sorry to tell you, but we are not all that great ourselves. I mean, I just consider all the stupid things that I did today, and I look at it, oh, wait, is this my calling, But there it is. We are given to dubious undertakings and dubious explanations that we give to our undertaking, and it goes on and on. So that this should not be taken as an insult or a put down on humanity, but this is the way that humanity has functioned. After all, it is since Teilhard de Chardin and other great anthropologists, it has become fairly clear that the entirety of humanity has come from a small portion of Africa and marched from there in an ongoing procession to the entire world. So we all come from a small place, and when all is said and done, we are rather a small people. And yet the small people coming from a small place has pretty much taken over the entirety of the world. So there must be something to this humanity that is powerful, that is very thoughtful, that plans well, and that is determined in its movements and development. And when that is understood, then various other issues can be dealt with in a more understanding and more rational fashion. So we are a weird group. And all we need to do is just look at each other in a room like this. I mean, do you want any weirder than we are here tonight? No, I don't. So, we have our predilections, we have our peculiarities, but somehow the ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, and so forth, had added to that the notion that we have the capacity to become conscious, as we would call it nowadays, to rise out of a not particularly insightful, foggy kind of semi-consciousness to much greater consciousness, and that in doing so we produce people like Plato and Aristotle and Tutankhamen in Egypt and others, because we are strange. Unlike the animals, we can see the further developments of consciousness. And it just occurs to me that if you are thus inclined, if you could subject your own processes of consciousness, of awareness, of the cataloging of data that come to you and so forth, you may come to the conclusion that you are a very, very talented creature. To do all of that, to reach so many conclusions, to design as many gods as the Greeks did, for instance, and then translate them into Latin and make them Roman gods. These are not ordinary activities, but these are all activities that ensue from a species that is very unusual, and that unusualness and what gives rise to that unusualness is worthy of study. That is why one teacher I had long ago and far away said that if we want to understand God, we have to understand the human. That anthropology is the predecessor of theology. It's a nice and highfalutin statement, and I don't even know if I completely agree with it, but it's a good statement nevertheless. And so these are all issues that we sort of need to keep in mind. Now, I should have brought it with me, but I can bring it with me next time. I have a nice old book. Most of my books are old, not all of them are nice. And in that nice old book, published, I believe, not in the USA, in England, and it is, I'm not sure whether that's the title of it, but it contains the genealogy of the ancient gods. So about the first 50 pages or so, in alphabetical order, one god, one goddess after the other. So it's really a very godly book. But let us say, when we don't just take that in stride, but if we see that, all of these have genealogical connections, all of them are the descendants of Zeus, usually of Zeus and Hera, and so there is a whole huge family there, which is the family of the gods. And now, of course, when we look at that with monotheistic eyes, it doesn't make too much sense. But on the other hand, maybe monotheism in itself, as such, doesn't make too much sense. Why? Because it reduces the governing forces of the universe to a singular and rather dull a kind of assembly of beings. And somehow the one thing that I never could really stomach with classes of that sort is that they make the divine world, the super world where the gods and the goddesses are according to ancient theology, they make it dull. And yet when you see the behavior, say, of the Greek gods and so forth, those are by no means dull beings. They really like to have fun, they like to have something exciting going on. And still the way they come off, especially by the time they reach the Roman matrix, they are kind of dull. Now, not to say that, shall we say, the Hebrew God down the road is a particularly exciting, joyous fellow, because he isn't. There's just no doubt about it. Although there are here and there, if you read between the lines, you find in the various books references to the fact that at least some of the wiser members of the Jewish priesthood recognized their limitations and they looked out with wisdom and understanding to the so-called pagans, because they understood that they could learn something from them. Also, there are, you might say, there are attempted combinations of Hebrew, Jewish theology and pagan theologies that always come up. And then usually some high priest or somebody becomes very angry. You can't do that, you are bringing the pagan gods into the temple and everything else, and then they cause a big fracas, and then eventually they forget about it. And in some cases, there is some wisdom in that fracas. For instance, it is recorded in pretty reliable fashion that when Alexander the Great, who is a great admired figure in my unconscious, in my conscious, and everywhere, when Alexander the Great was the grape, that was another. He was probably a man who owned vineyards. They called him Alexander the Great. Now, don't take that too seriously, because I don't take it. If the person who utters it does not take it seriously, then why should you? So there you are. In any event, Alexander the Great was coming back from his big campaign that led him clear into India, and was coming back, and of course where he went, his objective was what else? Egypt. He was moving toward Egypt. But on the way to Egypt, there was also Israel. See, it might amaze you that there was already Israel at that time. Sure as heck there was. So Alexander went into Jerusalem. He met the high priest of the Jews, and the high priest said to him, "You, king, you are not just a general and a king, but you have something else." He says, "You have in you the fire of the gods. You are something else. You should live up to that, keep thinking about it, and so forth. Then you will continue to prosper, because you are a divine man." That's for an Orthodox Jewish priest to say that to a goy king, is not an easy thing, but they did. And so, of course, his prognostications have fallen in line with many of the visions and unusual experiences that Alexander himself had, and I'm going to come back to him because he's very important in this. And therefore, yes.
Did they ever say the name of the high priest of Israel at the time that confronted Alexander? I've never heard that.
Well, you know what? You just put a bug into my head and I look for it, because I know where I know a source. And I'm almost certain that there is a name there too. Yeah. In any event, we have to remember that a lot of the ancient people, including Jews, were no dullards and no dumbbells. You know, they said sure there is the one God and so on and so forth, but also at the same time they saw beyond the verbal definitions of their faith. One wishes that more Christian preachers or current rabbis would do the same, because words are words, but behind the words there are concepts. Behind the concepts there are archetypal images. And behind the archetypal images, there are the actual archetypes themselves. Mysterious semi-divine beings who relate to the human experience and who have always been recognized in some fashion, and whom to leave out of the equation of life, I think, was a grave mistake. So, you know, rigid monotheism it makes a tremendous mistake in reducing the many to the one. On the other hand, when people then latch on to the one and remain there, as we can see in Orthodox Islam and things like that, they also do themselves and their followers usually a great deal of harm, because this may be a difficult thing for many of us to face, but there is not only one truth. There is not only one thing that is true, but there is a truth, and there is a truth, and there is a truth. And the more of those you recognize, and the more of them you pay attention to, which of course in olden days was going to their temple and taking a sacrifice, taking a nice big fat calf or sheep or something like that, and so then you are doing something important. But when you have narrowed your focus to the one God of the desert, who is the founder of the Jewish religion, of course, a desert god, or if in other ways you narrow down your vision when your vision could expand, then you have made a mistake. So I don't know how I ended up with all of this, but anything for the sake of Alexander, who has always been my god.
Alexander the Great, I'll never forget that.
Alexander the Great. Although he wasn't a very tall man. He wasn't a very big man. He, in fact, there's a Latin saying about him: Magnus Alexander corpore parvus erat. Alexander the Great was a small body. he was a short man, a short and very good-looking man. In any event, those are some of the issues to consider, that when it comes, and that the ancients had a sense of that. That's why they had all the gods and the goddesses, There is a whole existential realm that resembles this one and yet doesn't. World of the archetypes, whatever, the world of the gods and the goddesses, the world beyond the great curtain. And if you recognize the existence of that, then you have opened yourself up to some possibilities of cognition that previously have not been open to you. Sigmund Freud, the confessed atheist, and so forth, the Jewish atheist, Sigmund Freud had a great big desk in his office, huge thing. I think I had one time that was almost that big, but I didn't. On his desk there stood, head by head, shoulder to shoulder, innumerable statues of ancient gods, Greek, Egyptian, Roman, Etruscan, you name it, they were all there. And I think it was somebody who went to visit him now. I'm not sure who wrote about him, because one time I was called professionally to help write a biographical novel of Sigmund Freud. And if you don't think that was a lot of work, really, awful lot. But there I discovered that other people like Jung, and of course Jung was a Christian pagan from Switzerland, but Jung indicated to him that, Dr. Freud, are you really comfortable with all these pagan gods here? He said, oh yes, I wouldn't have them if I weren't comfortable with them, You didn't criticize Freud without getting a strong back wind from him. And he was a tough old cookie. In any event, now what we need to keep in mind, that the gods and the goddesses of antiquity were alive. They were not just in somebody's book, even you may call it a holy book. They were living and breathing and above all thinking beings of some sort. And this in turn enriched the lives of the cultures which they had. Because, for instance, if you just look into which has much fewer persons in it and so forth. If you look just into Roman religion, for instance, and the mythology underlying it, you will see that there is a tremendous amount of, how should we call it, sacred credulity that is required of the Roman worshipper. But somehow behind that sacred credulity, the people who went into the temples of Jupiter or Venus or the others had their intuition called upon to find out, is there something really back there? And many of them did. And these people who found out at an intuitive level the authenticity, the veracity of the ancient gods, whether in Rome or in Greece or for that matter in Egypt, these people were immensely enriched. And then the other members of the populace would call them pious. The word pious, which by now at least 12, I don't think that all popes have one, which just means the pious one, the good man, the religious one. You see, that was the term that people applied to people who they felt were in their eyes properly religious, who went to the temples of the gods and prayed, who brought sacrifices. In some cases they even raised, cultivated the sacrifices, as in the famous temple of the sacred capital in Greece. The sacred geese were sacred because at one point in legendary Roman history, the enemies, I don't know who they were, Greeks or what, the enemies were creeping up on Rome and were about to conquer it. Now there was a bunch of not grapes, a bunch of geese who were there, and the geese became alarmed, and they started, come on guys, the enemy is coming, you know, and just as soon as they did that, of course, the various guards, the soldiers, the priests all woke up. They chased the enemy away, and everything was all right. So, and the geese became sacred because they acted like they acted like a seer or a guard. And that sort of thing always brought rewards. You know that Madame Blavatsky's family, since we never can leave Blavatsky out of the evening, Madame Blavatsky's family was the von Hahn family. In fact, I like to brag, a first cousin of mine, about 20 years ago, married a member of the Hahn family, and Hahn, H-A-H-N, which in German means rooster.
Oh, wow. Rooster.
The rooster, yeah. And the family is obviously still around. There are various branches of it. As Mr. Boris Zirkov, who was Madame Blavatsky's great nephew, very, very lovely man who lived here in Los Angeles. He used to speak here quite frequently. And when I mentioned to him, look, I don't know whether now I'm a relative of yours, but you know, a cousin of mine married Hahn. And so he said, oh, he says, there are many branches, but there is only one Hahn family. He says, welcome, welcome, A great man. In any event, there too, because what the knight Hahn, Madame Blavatsky's parents were Rothenstern Hahns. There are other combinations. In any event, he was there in the crusade, and a rooster somehow made his home in the camp, and he screamed bloody murder. And so a number of the knights, including the knight who later on came to be known as Hahn, woke up. And they walked around and they looked and they saw the Saracens coming in, creeping in, so he blew the horns and everything, so the attack upon the camp was prevented. And from then on they had as their coat of arms a rooster, and their name was von Hahn.
Wow.
And some of them became the Rothenstern Hans, and some of them became the Hahn Hans. Yeah. In any event, that those sorts of things can happen. So often that is why heraldry, at least to me, because I'm a weird guy anyway, to me heraldry is very interesting, because especially if you secure some information as to what period and in what country the individual received his coat of arms, and what the symbols on the coat of arms are, it gives you an interesting imaginative idea of possibly the forthcoming history of that family, and really what they stand for. See, my family has a stag.
I can see that.
Yeah, a stag jumping over a fence, and in various colors, and we still have it. We can never let go of it. These things have various significances. So you see, this is also something that we should keep in mind generally, that the old people, back into the Middle Ages, even earlier, and all throughout history, the old people had something over us. And what was that? Imagination. They had an imagination, they used it, and they profited by it in various ways, psychological, physical, historical, whatever the case may be. And that's quite important, because without a good imagination and without being able to put your imagination to use, you're not going to have much of a life. Not going to have much of a life. That is why the arts, such as painting and sculpture and things like that, were regarded very highly in the ancient world, and they were regarded in the later world. And as we were talking with Michael not long ago, as to how the Italian culture, for instance, incorporated the artistic tastes and the artistic imagination of the Romans. Well, people say, all right, well, it was their heritage, but not everybody recognizes his heritage and utilizes it in such an important way. So it's important for us to have an imagination and to possibly join that imagination, when possible, to the imagination of others who have gone before. That is how art, that is how poetry, that is how dancing, all of these things are passed on because it catches people's imagination. And that is why I have very great dubiosity about so many of the tendencies in the contemporary world to have everything technological and along those lines, because even though I'm sure that some of the great inventors like Thomas Alva Edison, who by the way was a long time member of the Theosophical Society.
Oh, I have no idea.
He was, sure enough.
Huh.
And a number of early physicists, people like that, they managed to combine their imagination with their scientific interests, and they obviously came up with very interesting things. But I don't know, but I somehow don't have the same degree of confidence in the present scientific world. I just don't. Well, I have a right to be skeptical about that, like other people have a right to be skeptical about other things.
Not even Elon Musk.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't know the gentleman, but my confidence is not the same. So now then, returning to what is really a great mystery still, to history, to science, namely ancient Egypt. So by the time Alexander came to Rome and came to Egypt, and thereafter, the interest of the Greeks, to the extent that they moved in large numbers to Egypt from Greece, and the whole Greek-Egyptian culture developed, which was largely based in the city of Alexandria, and so forth. And then with Julius Caesar didn't just fall in love with Cleopatra, but with the ancient Egyptian culture itself. And so there was a psychological awakening that took place. Now, of course, you have to remember that we live in a material world, and when such a psychological awakening takes place, then it often has also a material side. Now, we've got to remember that Rome literally ate ancient Egypt. If it hadn't been for the vast grain fields of ancient Egypt, they wouldn't have been able to ship, after Julius Caesar set foot there, they wouldn't have been able to ship vast quantities of grain from Egypt to Rome. And that is what Rome ate on. So let's say Rome's stomach for a long time was located in Egypt. And for good reason, because Romans like to eat just like everybody else. In fact, there are books about ancient Rome that mention quite a lot of menus of ancient Rome. And I tell you that some of that, you kind of wish that you could be there and eat some of it. Really very enticing. And of course, a good Falernian wine always on the side. Great wine connoisseurs and great wine drinkers. But we need to remember that there were, of course, important economic connections like that, including the constant shipping of grain, because the portions of Egypt are very fertile. And for instance, it just jumps into my head, the name alchemy is Arabic, meaning the black land. Al-Chem. Al is so from then on the recognition, but of course on the other side too, the black land is black because the annual inundations of the Nile River bring black mud of a very good agricultural potential out into the land. They inundate the land, and then you have to wait till that sort of sinks in, and then it grows like you wouldn't believe. I know a tiny bit about it, although I've never been to Egypt, but my family, my grandmother's family primarily, owned quite a bit of land in southern Hungary, which now is Serbia, and maybe it's going to be the kingdom of the Hottentots if you leave the people enough leeway. But it's a very good soil for grains, for corn and for wheat and all those things. And so a small amount of land there was worth a great deal of land somewhere else. And so it's the same kind of thing. The humus soil, which comes from in our country, comes from the Danube River primarily. In Egypt, of course, comes from the Nile. So, and therefore, the black science, the black science is the science of the fertile land as well. So all of that is important. So when Caesar went over there, romancing Cleopatra and all that, he also had in mind that now we have a granary, now we have a supply of grain for our bread. And after all, what did the Romans like most? Panem et circenses, bread and circuses. You have to feed the people and you have to entertain them. So I think if your calling in this life is as a cook, that will please you. And if your calling in this life is an entertainer or having to do with the entertainment business, then that will all apply to you, because these are what the people want. They don't want. The American people don't want to conquer the Ukraine and toss out Mr. Chief, and he was an NKVD man. But anyway, that's not what they want. What they want is not to be hungry, which they have so often been, and also to have entertainment. And if the entertainment involves lions tearing up some people whom you don't particularly value, well, that's too bad. That's too bad. But ancient Rome is also a very interesting place. And so I understand, even though I've been there only briefly a couple of times, so is the contemporary Rome. And the contemporary Italy. They are very interesting places because some of that Roman spirit, some of that tradition that runs in the blood, that's still there. And for which reason, among others, at least I might as well spread my judgment around. I prefer Italian food to French food. and not only that, but also the people who serve it. The cooks and the waiters and things like that. There is such open friendliness and kindness in them that you have to travel up and down France till the French cows come home before you find anything like that. So it is something that is of importance. Now then, trying to come back to our subject matter, what I was trying to allude to with these curious remarks, among others, was that Egypt, the conquest of Egypt, became an immense boon to Rome, and that Rome was very looked from several angles, you might say. Rome looked to Egypt with a great deal of interest and with a great deal of reverence. So it's not impossible to imagine that if indeed the ancient gods and goddesses could be contacted somewhere, one could have messages from them or things of that sort. It would be quite possible that the ancient gods would be present and important and exercise a great deal of influence on Egypt. In some of the ancient scriptures, including Hermetic scriptures, refer to Egypt as the source of inspiration, of commerce, of wisdom, of everything. So that if you wanted to contact an ancient culture of incredible background, incredible power, they said, Egypt is the land where the gods walked with men. Now you can.
A great story to verify that I heard last year.
Yeah.
I want to hear this. It's so relevant. I'm going to interrupt.
Oh yeah.
The guy told me this, and I asked him. I said, "Tell me another story," because I had some magical experiences myself. He said there was a guide who was cynical about the gods and actually hated the. Was very cynical about all of the energies there. Anyhow, he says they were in Dendar on the roof, in one of the temples there, Luxor, I guess everyone gone, the tourists had gone, and they were looking down, and suddenly, and they were side by side, and suddenly the woman was just pushed forward, and she said, "Why did you push me?" He said, "I didn't do anything." And it was so extreme, the guy told me, that she had to hold on the side and not to fall
to
over.
hang on in the not to fall
And
over.
so what happened, she went back, and he told me she took the next day, she sent him a picture of her back, and on her back was a solid imprint of a hand.
Oh, wow.
Now, I have every reason to believe this is absolutely true because we exchange other stories about these energies, you know.
Sure,
And
sure.
and I had some myself too, that I had witnesses too there. So it shows that the energies, the archetypes of the Egyptian gods are still alive and don't mock them.
I would say that that is very, very likely so, because for one thing, what we got to remember, both regarding various polytheistic cultures like Rome, Greece, Egypt, and so forth, that one of the chief characteristics of the gods and the goddesses is what? That they don't die.
Yeah.
They don't die, they are the immortals, often referred to as the immortal gods. And so that is quite meaningful in itself. Of course, we say, well, okay, how come they are and we are not? Well, go and ask them, you know. But let's say it is quite the case, and in Rome, for instance, which I know a little bit more because my father was a great devotee of ancient Rome. We had more books about ancient Rome than probably almost anything else. And he indicated that the divine world and the human world were not all that separate. For instance, he studied all the records that were still available about the Vestal Virgins. The Vestal Virgins were a sort of ancient Roman pagan, certainly not Christian, like a pagan nunnery. And what could be in Christendom could be the abbess, the head of the nunnery, the Virgo Pontifex, which means the virgin bridge builder. And you know who else is called a bridge builder to this day? The Pope, Pontifex Maximus. And so the Virgo Pontifex was also the guardian of the Sibylline oracles, which were very, very highly regarded. So when you wanted, excuse me, my rings, I found an old ring of mine with an Abraxas from Egypt, and it's slipping off my fingers because I lost weight since I last wore it. But in any event, what we also need to keep in mind that in many polytheistic cultures of antiquity, we can't really vouch for anything much later than that. But the ability of the ancient world, of the gods and the goddesses and so forth, to be present and to influence humans and to give them advice and various other communications was very, very great. And it was not something extraordinary, but something ordinary, which is an ordinaire. The word comes from the French and just means something that is frequently done. And that also needs to be kept in mind. In any event, within all of this matrix, and we'll talk about it some more, there occurred a maybe somewhat unusual event, and that was the arrival in Egypt this is now, of course, Roman Egypt and so forth, the arrival in Egypt of Hermes. Somehow, all of a sudden, Hermes, well, then people ask, how come Hermes is here now? But can't you see the wings on his sandals? Can't you see the wings on his helmet and on his wand? He flies. And now where we have Christian scholars of considerable import writing, like that interesting book that my good friend donated to us, wherein, this is in the Christian period, the numerous Christian saints and mystics who literally flew, and the book is called They Flew. They were flying. And I can believe it, first of all, because I was raised a Catholic boy, and I should believe what the saints do. But other than that, also that, let's say, I had experiences which were going in that direction, not myself. But I was raised by the Cistercian fathers, and we every morning, the boys, we had to jump around in the chapel wasn't very much bigger than this. We had a great big church too, but that was further down the road. But so there were all these small altars, and every priest, monk had to say mass in the morning. So, and there weren't enough of us. There were more teachers than kids, at least at that time. So I was assigned, rather contrary to my liking, to one Cistercian father. He was a music teacher. And you know, the music teacher, the art teacher, and maybe one or two others, they had no respect from the students. No respect. That's not a real teacher. No, the mathematics teacher is a real teacher because he makes us work. The Latin teacher is a real teacher, but not also. So in any event, I was assigned to this music teacher's mass in the morning. To serving, you know, it's enough if. So I was serving, and he was obviously, what I didn't understand at this time, he was a practicing mystic. When he was up there before the altar, the eyes rolled back in his head, and then there were times when I was behind him, you know, it was still when you faced the altar, yes, and I could see his shoes rise, not way up high, but maybe about this high, and I stood there. Oh my God! If this guy begins to fly, how am I going to do this? How am I going to explain to the superiors and so forth? Well, I won't have anything to do with it, but I really shouldn't. So anyway, I would see him rise to a certain height and then come down. Wow. So obviously something was going on. I can't tell you what it was, but I think it had something to do with flying. So anyway, these matters are being investigated now. But there was always a possibility of even ordinary people in their physical bodies flying. So why shouldn't there be one of Hermes who, obviously the Mount Olympus was still in Greece, so that was the heaven, that's where the gods were. And I always loved that. I don't know if one of the scholars wrote that if you walk down near Mount Olympus, ordinary Greeks, going somewhere, and you could hear the laughter, the ongoing laughter. It says the gods were always happy, the gods were always laughing, and some of that spilled over on the population. If you have happy gods, chances are that some of that happiness is going to rub off on you. But if you have grim, well, I won't go into any details, but let's say grim gods, then chances are that you are going to be more grim. And these things are of importance. So Hermes arrives in Egypt. And then from there, it would seem, he sort of spreads out his influence and his mantle, and the people begin to recognize him. Very soon now he is regarded as one of the Egyptian gods. He still has the wings on his helmet and so forth, but he is someone who impresses the people with his kindness, with his willingness to communicate, with being much more. I wish there was someone here. At one time we had several people who knew German. So when I wanted to, I could jump into German, but I can't do that. But in any event, there's a German word, Leutselig, which means weird expression, people's soul. You have a soul that responds to people. And so that Hermes was very leutselig. He would communicate, and his communications are, of course, the ones that will also interest us, because his communications then were written down, and clear in the time of Madame Blavatsky, her secretary and her great friend G.R.S. Mead wrote 3 heavy volumes of translation called The Thrice Greatest Hermes, which is one of the best, still one of the best translations. So let's say Hermes was a messenger. Does it sound familiar? Somebody who came from elsewhere, but who had business here, and who taught the people, and who helped the people, and who governed the people, and gave them teachings. And therefore, many people followed him thereafter, many people wrote down his communications, and those who did so may be called the Hermeticists, the followers of Hermes. But of course we need to keep in mind that the ancients, in Greco-Roman times and so forth, the ancients were not that exclusive with their religion. If Jupiter should come down and talk to them, I said, all right, Jove, Father, talk to us, So it was not a special grace, but a grace that the gods quite frequently bestowed. And so we have a quite interesting literature that is all ascribed to Hermes, and Hermes himself was regarded as the greatest of gods, the greatest of kings, the greatest of priests, the thrice greatest Hermes, Trismegistos in Greek, because the educated people's language was Greek, even in Egypt. So we need to keep this in mind that there was some, and it was at a certain time. The historians can point to you as to when Hermes seemed to arrive in Egypt. Boom, from now on, he was in the temples, he was in the academy, and he was teaching people. So now we'll, as to what message he seemed to have communicated, how that fits in with Gnosticism and Christianity, and so if we wish, and I wish anyway, we will try to pinpoint the next few Fridays, and then we will have maybe a little closer. And there are books available. Mead's is still, I think, the most beautiful, because Mead is both scholarly and poetic. The poet never overpowers the scholar, but the scholar is also always there. So Mead was really a fabulous guy, and I'll just conclude with that. Toward the end of his life, when he was already quite old and feeble, so that would have been in the 1920s or so. After all, he was there with Blavatsky when she died, just a few years before the turn of the century. He was there, a little heavy-set, broad-shouldered doctor from Switzerland came, and he said, "Mr. Mead, I have all of your books, I read English, and I absolutely wanted to meet you as to who the man was who has given us this incredible gift of translating all of these Gnostic and Hermetic materials." And Jung was there with tears running down his cheek. And Mr. Mead said, "Well, doctor, thank you so much for coming all the way from Switzerland." So you see, the right people recognize each other. The wrong people will never recognize each other. That's why the wrong people are mostly in the United Nations. And nothing happens as the result. Well, that's just a little nastiness. In any event, this is the beginning of the coming of Hermes. And we'll use some of the material and others. And even though Egypt has gone down the tubes thereafter, when the Arabs came and all of that, really, ever since ancient times, Egypt was not able to do what it once did. But these, in the writings of Hermes, it was already foretold that there would be a great downfall of Egypt, but that if they waited long enough, then the gods would return. So, and this is that particular passage in the Asclepius, which is one of the main Hermetic writings. "O Egypt, Egypt, there will remain there will remain your religion, of your religion only fables. Those who follow your ideas will be thought mad. Those who disparage your ideas will be celebrated, will be extolled, will be uplifted. The world will be turned upside down. But, O Egypt, Egypt, there will once there will once come a day when the gods are returned to them to their thrones, and when you are praised in your glory once again. You know what? I'm sorry to say, if you don't like this, but you know what this reminds me of? Present-day United States. The gods have gone. The ideals have gone. But there is always a hope in the future. So let's hope that here also there will be a day when the gods are returned to their thrones and you are praised in your glory once again. So maybe that's a little bit too much to bring that in, but I think it is because these patterns are the same. Things go well, things go beautiful, things are great, and then things go down. But let us hope that what goes down will also come back up again. And it has been that way in history, it will be that way in history, and if we behave ourselves as we should, and we cultivate our consciousness, it will be in history. Thanks very much, and we'll move on.